draining the rest of the fluid out of here. You see I've got the jack on there just to kind of tip it towards the drain. It's an 11mm drain plug. And they say anywhere from 7 to probably 11 quarts of fluid, depending on how much you do. Upping all these bolts, and there's a couple inside there, and then splitting this cover off so that I can change out the filter, which shows how much they don't want you making your transmission last, because you have to tear it apart to change the filter, and you'll probably ruin the gasket. And I'm sure somebody sells the gasket. They're probably outrageously expensive. I saw the gasket for this part here was like $50. I'm gonna go for it. This is probably beyond most DIY type projects, having the transmission out of the car like this. What I'm going to try to do, if I can, is I want to rotate this transmission so that it drops down this way and that this sits inside this tire here. Now I've drained all the fluid that will come out, and so hopefully no fluid will spill, but I do have the pan under it as well just in case. So I'm going to see I can kind of get it to come down slow. Yeah, see, it's probably too heavy for most people to pick up. But with it in here in this orientation, I'll be able to go around. There's, I think, 4 bolts inside, and then there's bolts all the way around. I'm not going to bore you taking them out on film. All right, the bolts are out. They are 1/2 inch heads on the bolts. However, 1/2 inch is about 12.7 millimeters, and the 1/2 inch socket was sticking to most of them. So I found that the 13 millimeter socket was a little easier to use because it wasn't sticking, so I could take it off and go to the next bolt real quickly. So it's almost like these are maybe like 12.71 or 12.72 millimeter bolt heads. Just, you know, typical frustration. They do all seem to be the same size though. I did lay them out in the order they came out. I always tend to do that just in case, because GM is notorious for having one that's longer or whatever, and if you put it in the wrong spot, it breaks something. Now, probably one of the hardest parts of this is going to be separating these halves. You've got to get between here and pry without damaging the gasket, or damaging the gasket as little as possible. So it's not really a pretty process. I've seen people take screwdrivers and a hammer and literally hammer in there. I don't know that I will try to do that. I may take a gasket scraper and try to wedge it between, but I'll try to figure out what works best. All right, it wasn't too bad. I actually used the gasket scraper, kind of tapped it with the hammer, kind of in the 4 corners, kind of got it to pop up a little bit, and then got the pry bar under and kind of got it until it, basically you heard it pop loose. And lay this on here. You can see what I'm talking about. There's still transmission fluid in the bottom, even though it's been draining for hours and hours and hours. And a little bit on the ground I need to clean up. So what we're going to do, we're going to You got one bolt there. Take this plastic piece out, and then I believe there's 3 10 millimeters that hold the pump on. And we're just going to lift the pump up just barely, just enough to get this clear. Okay, I blotted that up and cleaned. There's kind of that metallic mess, kind of like what you get when you have a magnet in your transmission. And the gasket looks like it survived. There's one spot right up top there that looks a little bit damaged, and that's not where I was prying, so I don't know, but I'm tempted to just put kind of a dab of RTV right there when I close this up, because otherwise it looks good. This piece stayed in, and the little bearing thing there stayed in. Those are 2 possibilities of falling out. All right, I did pull this piece out of here and put it in the transmission on the other side. Makes it a little bit easier to deal with. This should be a 10 millimeter. Just move that out of the way for the time being. Got 3 over here. And hopefully just by loosening that, yeah, we can get that out of there without totally removing that. So you see this thing is dirty and worn. There's your equivalent of your magnet there. You can see that goo is all in the bottom here, so I'm going to clean all of that out while I've got this apart. Try to make this as close to new as possible. It was shifting great with 147,000 miles on it. I'm curious to see, some people will say that this is going to mess it up, changing the fluid and everything. But I'm not one of those people. I'm a big believer in changing fluid and filters regularly. And we'll see if this is a mistake or not. Now I did look before I took this out, because I wanted to make sure that it wouldn't be the first time that they sent me the wrong filter. But it does match up. So one thing to note, they don't give you the gasket, which I don't understand the logic there. So you gotta try to pry it off of here. And then I'm gonna clean a little bit more before I pop this in. So that's gonna go back in there. And I see why they say that you can't probably squeeze that out without loosening that at least, because you got that little arm in the way. Now wish me luck. I'm going to try to find torque specs for these and this, and as well as all the bolts that hold this together. I have the online shop manual, and of course it says there are no serviceable parts of the transmission, so therefore they don't give you any information at all. It's pretty clear these manufacturers want you to basically drive your car until the transmission is destroyed and then buy a new transmission. They don't want you to service it. They don't want you changing fluid, filters. I mean, this is absurd that you have to go to this much trouble. They should have made this in some sort of panel that you could remove and change that out along with your fluid. I think that they're going to make more money making you buy a new transmission, when in reality you just say, I'm never buying another GM again, and then they wonder why they went bankrupt. Closer inspection, this is just dirty here. It's not, the gasket's still intact, so I'm going to reuse that gasket. I think it's fine. Any torque specs for the bolts of any kind. Oh, there goes that. This has to be staying on this other side. So if it falls, you gotta start over. And then just line up, there's little studs in two corners. All right, I ended up searching the internet for a long time looking for torque specs for this transmission. I searched under, GMC Acadia transmission, and then like the actual number of this transmission, which off the top of my head now I don't remember what the spec is, 6T70 or something like that. Anyway, could not find anything, and I'll tell you, that's just like an ongoing frustration I have with Google searches nowadays. It seems like you can't find what you're looking for because there's so much competition to be on page one or whatever, that the Google search results end up being basically useless stuff that's repeated over and over and over. Every search result you find is the same junk that has really nothing to do with what you're searching. So I opted to just go 18 foot-pounds all the way around. Don't know if that's perfect or not enough or what, but that's basically what the front cover torque spec was, and I figured these are got to be pretty close. So hopefully that will hold up. If not, I have no clue how easy this is to access once it's in the vehicle. My guess is it's probably darn near impossible. But I'm going to call this done, so it's going to have all new fluid once it goes back in the car. I'm not going to fill it up till it's in the car because obviously it can leak out of these spots, and so I don't want to put any fluid in it now. New filter in it, and until we get it all back in the car, we will have no idea if it works. I know we're about to hopefully at least give some anecdotal data for the question of, does changing the fluid and filter in an older transmission ruin the transmission or revive it? I'm guessing it's going to be revive, but won't know until everything's done.